Welcome to Real Estate and Taxes with Lakshay. I will be helping you minimize your taxes. Thank you once again for joining in. My name is Lakshay. Today's topic is going to be fines and penalties for illegal basement suite owners. Most of you guys are either investors, real estate agents, or realtors that are brand new in the business. If you have an existing property, whether it be in Brampton, Hamilton, St. Catharines, there are different municipalities and different legalities when it comes to having a legal basement suite. So today's topic, because I live in Brampton myself, I'm more lean towards looking at zoning bylaws for Brampton. So most of my presentation will be talking about what are some of the fines and penalties in the GTA area. So pardon me if you are from the outside the area, but you can certainly go to the city's website and find out what are some of the restrictions and fines and penalties within your province or within your jurisdiction wherever you live. So without further ado, let's get started. Today's agenda will be, we're going to be first starting with what is a secondary suite, followed by how to make those secondary suites legal, the costs associated with having an illegal basement or costs associated with converting an illegal basement to a legal basement, and then what are some of the fines, what are some of the penalties for illegal suites. Then we're going to conclude by what are best practices that we would recommend as accountants, as your financial advisor, in order to have the best case scenario. So let's get started. What are some of the requirements for constructing a secondary suite? Most of the time, the house needs to be at least 5 years old. It could be a semi-detached, it could be a detached house because they need to have a separate entrance. So on a townhouse, it will be very difficult to create a separate entrance. The exterior facade of the house cannot be significantly altered in order to create this secondary suite or a legal basement. The secondary suite needs to be a little bit smaller than the main primary residence, and the property must meet the parking requirements. For Hamilton, there are no requirements. You can have, for additional suite, you can have one. For Toronto, the zoning is R. For an additional suite, you don't need additional parkings. But for Brampton and other jurisdictions, there are, for every number of rooms, you want to read on the website, on city's website, as to what is the zoning of the property, and then read the bylaws associated with that zoning to find out does your property actually conform with the parking requirements. So those are some of the things that you definitely want to check before looking in the direction of converting a basement into a legal suite. What makes secondary suites legal? Well, the answer is simple. You want to comply with all of the building requirements, the fire safety requirements, the building permits, the zoning bylaws in order to make a suite legal. Whether it be, regarding the electrical safety codes or whether it be related to the fire safety standards. You want to make sure that all the rooms have the smoke alarms, the carbon monoxide detectors. They are well installed in the hallways as well as in the suite. The exit from the suite also needs to have significant room when it comes to, in case of a fire, you need to have certain height in the basement, which could be 6.5 feet. You need to have certain size of the windows in order to make sure that the person can escape in a case of a fire. So these are some of the laws and building permits and inspections that needs to be happen before you can call your suite legal. Now you must be wondering, we already know what is a secondary suite. We talked about what are the conditions to make a suite legal, that is to get it inspected by the building permit authorities as well as the city. And now let's move on to the third point, where what are the costs associated with making a suite legal. The costs are, first of all, renovation costs. It could be from $35 to $55 per square foot. So if you have a 1,000 square foot basement that you're trying to create, it'll cost you $55,000, which could be significant. The permit drawings can cost anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 depending on your square footage of the basement. There are also registration fees. The registration fees could be initial review, which is $200, followed by if it's an owner occupied or not owner occupied. If it's owner occupied, it's a little bit less, which is $500. But if it's non-owner occupied, an investment property, it is $1,000. And after that, there's also permit fees in order to make sure that all of the basement is legal. So these are some of the costs that you're looking at. Has anyone done any renovation in the near future or in the past very recently? So there are some grants, there are some subsidies that you want to look into when you're going into constructing a legal basement. There are some rebates in terms of insulation, in terms of creating your illegal basement to a legal basement. So I would like to point that part out, that you can certainly reach out to the city to see if there are any relief programs that can help you construct your legal basement suite. Our tip is, whenever you're going into any construction, especially a big project like your basement, you want to get a pre-inspection done. And with the pre-inspection inspector, you want to make sure you have a good relationship with them. You don't want to have your contractor butt heads with the inspector and then inspector saying no on things once the work is done. So it's a pre-inspection can save you a lot of cost, a lot of money if you have the right inspector. So work it out get a pre-inspection done on foundation, framing, plumbing, electrical, and HVAC. This can save you a lot of money in the long run, because they will point out what exactly it would take for the inspector to pass and close all the building permits. So make sure you work with a pre-inspector in order to get your work done and get started on the right foot. Now you must be wondering, how will the city ever find out if you have an illegal basement? Well, you can have an angry girlfriend who can complain, an investor who's potentially looking at buying the house and the deal falls through, an injured tenant, or a disgruntled tenant. These are some of the people who can simply complain to the municipality. And what would happen next? The municipality has the right to come in and do an inspection. And within that inspection, if there are some rules which I'll be talking about in the future slideshows, if you don't meet all the requirements, they're gonna have you pay a hefty fine. Now you must be wondering, what is that fine associated with having an illegal basement? Well, if the house is under your name, it could be $25,000 to a maximum, but if it's under a corporation name, it could be as high as $50,000. Yes, you heard it right. It could be very high money, very significant amount. Imagine this, right? You're collecting $1,500 from an illegal basement. How many months of rent it would take to pay off a fine like this? So our recommendation is to do the things the right way, which is to have a legal basement. Even with the insurance, if let's assume there was a fire or a flood and the insurance company finds out you have a tenant living in the basement, this can create a very big issue. What would happen is the insurance can make the policy void and not pay you any money if there was any mishappening that happens and someone gets injured in the house. So make sure to look at your insurance policy as well as do a cost benefit analysis. Sometimes it is better to actually bite the bullet, convert your illegal basement to a legal basement, and have basically a good night's sleep. And if let's assume a city inspector comes in, what are the next steps? The city inspector will actually classify your property in one of the three ways: legal, non-conforming, or non-conforming. And if you don't meet these conditions, and if it's non-conforming to the city bylaws and the building permits, they can have you pay a big fine, or they can also provide a list of changes and a timeline with it. And with that timeline, you have to make those changes to the basement and make sure and get back to the inspector that you have met all the requirements if there was a scenario like this. You can also be sued by your tenant if there was an accident in the illegal second suite. So make sure, I would highly recommend the $50,000 penalty is a bit too much. So it is always a good idea to convert your illegal suite to a legal suite. Or the point of today's presentation is at least you can start looking into that direction, that, okay, you know what? I've had the tenants for a very long time. Maybe it's time to make things proper and make things legal, and try to get the process started. So our suggestion is it's beneficial to construct a legal suite. Why? Because when the time comes to sell the house in the market and on the MLS you are able to write a legal basement, that brings in additional $100,000 to the cost of the house. So I would highly recommend start looking at that direction. Also, now with the interest rates going up so high, the mortgage payments for everyone has basically changed significantly, $1,000 to $2,000 in some cases on a month-to-month basis. So rent from a legal suite is always more than if you were to illegally have the rental apartment. So make sure to kind of look into that direction, hire someone educated as well as someone who knows a good contracting team, and you can take this and finish off the project within 2 months time. The cost could be from $35,000 to $55,000. Now I've noticed the costs are going from $55,000 to even $80,000. So the cost of construction keeps going on, so it's actually better to get the construction done sooner rather than later. And also, in case of a fire or a flood, the insurance company would simply void your insurance policy if they find out that it was tenanted in the basement. So why give them a reason to do something odd like this? Start looking into the direction of constructing a legal suite. That wraps up today's presentation. Thank you guys very much for joining in. I really appreciate your time. We do these sessions every Tuesday, so I'll also see you guys next Tuesday.